Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Shri Radhe. Jaya Lalita Vishaka Lalita Vishaka Shri Radhe. Jaya Nitai Gora Sundar Nitai Gora Sundar Gora Hari. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sri Rajakacharya, Ashtotara Shatashri Srimad Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sri Rajakacharya, Ashtotara Shatashri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nasta Praeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Shinvatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyanta Savya Bhadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 6:18-62. Chakarta Saptadha Garbham Vajrena Kanaka Prabham Rudantam Saptadhaikaikam Marodir Ititan Punaha. Chakarta Saptadha Garbham Vajrena Kanaka Prabham Rudantam Saptadhaikaikam Marodir Ititan Punaha. Chakarta Saptadha Garbham Vajrena Kanaka Prabham Rudantam Saptadhaikaikam Marodirititan Puna. Anyone like to recite?
Jakarta tada garbham vajrena kanaka prabham rudantam saptadaikaikam marudir ititam punaha.
Chakarta saptada garbham vajrena kanaka prabham rudantam saptadaikaikam mavrodir ititan punah.
Chakarta Saptahat Garbham Vajrena Kanakabraham Rudantam Saptadhaikaikam Marodiri Punaha.
Thank you, dear devotees. Chakarta, he cut. Saptadha, into 7 pieces. Garbham, the embryo. Vajrena, by his thunderbolt. Kanaka, of gold. Prabham, which had the appearance. Rudantam, crying. Saptadha, into 7 pieces. Eka ekam, each one. Marodi, do not cry. Iti, thus. Tan, them. Punaha, again. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. After entering Diti's womb, Indra, with the help of his thunderbolt, cut into 7 pieces her embryo, which appeared like glowing gold. In 7 places, 7 different living beings began crying. Indra told them, "Do not cry," and then he cut each of them into 7 pieces again. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that Indra, by his yogic power, first expanded the body of the one Marut into 7, and then when he cut each of the 7 parts of the original body into pieces, there were 49. When each body was cut into 7, other living entities entered the new bodies, and thus they were like plants, which became separate entities when cut into various parts and planted on a hill. The first body was one, and when it was cut into many pieces, many other living entities entered the new bodies. Om Jnanatimirandasya Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitascha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation again. After entering Diti's womb, Indra, with the help of his thunderbolt, cut into 7 pieces her embryo, which appeared like glowing gold. In 7 places, 7 different living beings began crying. Indra told them, "Do not cry," and then he cut each of them into 7 pieces again. Welcome everyone to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. So the context for this verse is that Aditi, she sees Indra as an enemy, so she requests from Kashyapa Muni, her husband, a son that will kill Indra. Indra, of course, is also Kashyapa Muni's son, and Kashyapa Muni asked Diti to perform a ritualistic ceremony for 1 year. And the thing is, if she made a mistake during that ceremony, then instead of an enemy of Indra being born, a friend of Indra would be born. Secondly, Kashyapa Muni knew that she would be purified by performing this ritual to Vishnu and be freed from the enmity toward Indra. So Indra heard about the ceremony she was performing, and he came to serve her during it. So Bhagavatam describes that as the hunter of a deer becomes like a deer by covering his body with deerskin and serving the deer, so Indra, although at heart the enemy of the sons of Diti, became outwardly friendly and served Diti in a faithful way. Indra's purpose was to cheat Diti as soon as he could find some fault in the way she discharged the vows of the ritualistic ceremony. However, he wanted to be undetected, and therefore he served her very carefully. So over the course of her performing her austerity, there's a time where she became thin and weak, and one time she took prasadam, and she forgot to wash her hands, feet, and mouth before falling asleep. So there she made a mistake, and Indra saw this and took this opportunity to enter her womb. And seeing the child there, used his thunderbolt and chopped the child into 7 pieces. But because the child was being produced from a sacrifice to Vishnu, the child didn't die. So 7 children were now present, and then he chopped each child up into 7 more pieces, which made 49 children. But they were still alive. Yeah, so that's where we are in the verse today. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that 6 other living entities appeared. So there was 1 living entity, and he remained in 1 piece, and 6 other living entities appeared and entered into each of the pieces. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur anticipates that in this scientific age, people will ask, how is it possible? So he's describing. He gives a very simple example, just like in Vrindakun, we have 1 plant. You just break a little piece and stick it into the ground, and it becomes another one. You break a little piece, stick it in the ground, and a beautiful little pinkish reddish flower. So therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is very scientifically describing that another living entity enters. When we cut that plant, and plant it, then another living entity enters. In the same way, these Maruts appeared, and because Diti had some devotional service to the Lord, when she saw Indra with her 49 sons, we also understand that she was not at all angry. Her heart had become purified of anger. So that's the effect of performing devotional service. We also understand that Indra first entered her nostril, and from the nostril he entered her womb, says the Vamana Purana. And we hear in this Sanskrit of this verse, Rudantam, which means crying. We also hear this word Rudantam in Dhammadarastakam. Rudantam muhur netra yugma mijantam. So Rudantam muhur. Muhur in Sanskrit means again and again. Damodar cried and rubbed his eyes again and again. So what happened is when Indra saw living entities crying, he said, Maruda, Maruda, don't cry, don't cry. So he was afraid that Diti will wake up and find out what he's up to. Then he slashed each of the 7 into 7, and they again cried, and he said, Maruda, Maruda, Maruda. So because he said Maruda, they become known as the Maruts, the 49 different winds. So we understand, though, that we'll understand later that in this pastime that Diti's heart had become purified of anger through the effect of performing the devotional service. So we see in this pastime that worshiping Lord Vishnu purifies. That's what we see in the story of Diti and Indra. Prabhupada quotes later in this pastime that Oma Pavitra Pavitro Va. This is from the Garuda Purana. It's also quoted by Sanatana Goswami in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. Oma Pavitra Pavitro Va, whether one is purified or impurified. Sarva Vastam Gatopi Va, if one has passed through all conditions of material life. Yasmaret Pundarikaksham, if one meditates or remembers the Supreme Lord, who is beautified with lotus petal eyes. Sabhaya Bhantara Suchihi Sri Vishnu Sri Vishnu Sri Vishnu. One becomes cleansed both internally and externally. So this is the potency of meditating on the Supreme Lord. One becomes cleansed internally and externally. So we also see that other stories where the devotees become purified by remembering Krishna and engaging in devotional service. So we hear in the story of Dhruva Maharaj as well. This is a very important story. Lord Chaitanya and Gadadhar Pandit were engaging in talks, and Lord Chaitanya was having Gadadhar Pandit recite Srimad Bhagavatam to him. And there were 2 stories that he especially wanted to hear about. And those 2 stories were the story of Prahlad Maharaj and the story of Dhruva Maharaj. So we understand the importance of this story of Dhruva Maharaj. So the story of Dhruva Maharaj is that Dhruva Maharaj was a 5-year-old boy who saw his father sitting on the throne with his brother sitting on his lap. And the mother of his brother is also in the courtroom. Her name is Suruchi. So Dhruva Maharaj, he tries to get on his father's lap as well, but he's not allowed. And Suruchi, Dhruva Maharaj has a different mother than his brother. His mother is Suniti, but his brother's mother is Suruchi. And Suruchi says that she speaks harshly to him and says that if he wants to sit on his father's lap, he has to worship Lord Vishnu and then be born from her womb to get to do that. So Dhruva is very devastated from this experience, being rejected, and he goes to his mother, and his mother says that she can't help him, and that Suruchi is right, that he needs to worship Lord Narayan to be helped. So Dhruva Maharaj, he goes to the forest, and he spends time doing austerities. And eventually he gets to see the Lord. And we hear in Bhagavatam 4:9-29 that Maitreya speaking about this. Matahu sapatnya vagbanair hridi vidhastu tan smaran naichan mukti pater muktim tasmat tapam upayivan. Maitreya is explaining that Dhruva Maharaj's heart, which was pierced by the arrows of the harsh words of his stepmother, was greatly aggrieved. And thus when he fixed upon his goal of life, he did not forget her misbehavior. He did not demand actual liberation from this material world, but at the end of his devotional service, when the Supreme Personality of God had appeared before him, he was simply ashamed of the material demands he had in his mind. So Srila Prabhupada is talking about in the purport that this important verse has been discussed by many stalwart commentators. Why was Dhruva Maharaj not very pleased even after achieving the goal of life he desired? So in the purport, Prabhupada says, a pure devotee has no demand from the Lord. So we understand that from Srila Prabhupada explaining these things that God is not our order supplier. And the purport, he further explains in the Mukundamala Stotra, King Kulashekar, author of the book, states in his prayer, "My dear Lord, I don't want any position of sense gratification within this material world. I simply want to engage in your service perpetually." Similarly, Lord Chaitanya in his Shikshashtaka also prayed, "My Lord, I do not want any amount of material wealth. I do not want any number of materialistic followers, nor do I want any attractive wife to enjoy. Only thing I want is that I may engage life after life in your service." So Lord Chaitanya did not pray even for mukti or liberation. And we understand that Jivara Sarupa Hoy Krishnara Nitya, the Jiva's position is an eternal servant of the Lord. Das Anudas, the servant of the servant of the servant. He says further in the purport that Lord Chaitanya also says in this connection that the constitutional position of a living entity is to render service to the Lord. The purport continues that the great sage Maitreya explained that Dhruva Maharaj did not desire in the beginning to engage in the service of the Lord, but he wanted an exalted position better than his great-grandfather's. This is more or less not service to the Lord, but service to the senses. Even if one gets the position of Brahma, the most exalted position in this material world, he is a conditioned soul. Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati says that if one is elevated to real pure devotional service, he considers even great demigods like Brahma and Indra to be on an equal level with the insignificant insect. The reason is that an insignificant insect also has a desire for sense gratification, and even a great personality like Lord Brahma also wants to dominate this material nature. Sense gratification means domination over material nature. And later on, the purport also describes that elsewhere it is described that after the appearance of the Lord, when Dhruva Maharaj thought and compared his determination to his final reward, he realized that he had wanted a few particles of broken glass, but instead had received many diamonds. As soon as he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, he immediately became conscious of the unimportance of his demand from the Lord to have an exalted position better than Lord Brahma's. When Dhruva Maharaj became situated on the Vasudev platform, due to seeing the Lord face to face, all his material contamination was cleared. So we understand that originally he wanted to get a kingdom greater than his grandfather and his great-grandfathers. So his grandfather is Manu, his great-grandfather is Lord Brahma. But upon seeing the Lord, he realized that wanting that great material position was just like asking for a few particles of broken glass. But the devotional service of the Lord was receiving many diamonds. Meant receiving many diamonds. We also understand from this verse that we can understand that Diti is very happy to achieve so many sons, 49 sons. We can expect that she'll be very happy to see that, because back previously, in previous ages, women were very happy to receive many sons or many children. In Kali Yuga now, that's not so much the case. Children are seen as troublesome, and we just want to enjoy life in other ways rather than like that. We want to enjoy life like crazy, and we can't seem to be peaceful. But we understand from the Bhagavad Gita what the peace formula is. The last verse of chapter 5, 529 explains this, that Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam, that Krishna is the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities. He's the he's the enjoyer of the bhoga. He's the bhokta. Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam, Yagya Tapasam. And he's also Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He is the lord of all planets and demigods. And thirdly, he is Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. He is the well-wisher of all living entities, the Suhrida, the friend. And Gyatva Mam Shantim Richati, one who knows this, can attain peace. And of course, everyone wants to be happy. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that one cannot be happy without peace. He explains in Bhagavad Gita 266 that Nasti buddhir yuktasya na cha yuktasya bhavana na cha bhavayata shantir ashantasya kutasukam. The one who is not connected to the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? And in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that unless one is in Krishna consciousness, there is no possibility of peace. So he says that it's confirmed in the 5th chapter, 529, the verse we spoke about, that when one understands that Krishna is the only enjoyer of all the good results of sacrifice and penance, that he is the proprietor of all universal manifestations, and that he is the real friend of all living entities, then only can one have real peace. He continues to say that, therefore, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be a final goal for the mind. So we understand that everyone is looking for purpose and goal in life. We make short-term goals and long-term goals. But ultimately, these short-term or long-term material goals, they do not extend. They're temporary and they're finished at the end of our lifetime. But our spiritual goals, we make our spiritual progress and it extends for lifetime after lifetime. So we understand from the Bhagavad Gita 240, Neha bhikramanashosti pratyavayo navidyate swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. That in this endeavor of devotional service, there's no loss or diminution. So this is our spiritual goals. They extend beyond this lifetime. They're the final goal, that final exam in the school of life. We also understand from that verse that a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. And that most dangerous type of fear is falling back down into the 800 million species of life that aren't human life. So we understand that the human form of life is very rare. Bhagavatam discusses this, 11.2.29. Durlabha manusho deho, dehinam shanabhangara, tatrarpi durlabham manye, vaikunta priyadarshanaha. So durlabha manusho deho, this body is very durlabha, rare to obtain. Dehinam Kshanabhangara. It's prone to be destroyed at any moment. Tatrapi Durlabham Manye, but considered more rare is Vaikuntha Priyadarshanaha, the darshan of seeing the association of those who are dear to the Lord of Vaikuntha. So we are in this particular situation where we have both a human life to practice spiritual life. We're also seeing those who are dear to the Lord and engaging in this devotional service process. After transmigrating through so many species, 8,400,000 species of life, we have this opportunity to make spiritual advancement in this lifetime, even though in this material world we're like a fish out of water, a fish in the ocean of material existence. Srila Prabhupada was saying, though, that if one is not in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be a final goal for the mind. And he continues that disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. And when one is certain that Krishna is the enjoyer, proprietor, and friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, bring about peace. But how can there be peace? Because we also have so many desires we're always dealing with. Like the Bhagavad Gita 270 explains, Apuryamanam achala pratishtam samudram apa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kama yam pravishanti sarve sashantim apnoti nakama kami. Although the vast ocean is always filled with water, a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that is the proof of a Krishna conscious man, one who has lost all inclinations for material sense gratification, although the desires are present. Because he remains satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he can remain steady like the ocean, and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who want to fulfill desires even up to the limit of liberation, what to speak of material success, never attain peace. The fruitive workers, the salvationists, and also the yogis who are after mystic powers are all unhappy because of unfulfilled desires. But the person in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord, and he has no desires to be fulfilled. In fact, he does not even desire liberation from the so-called material bondage. The devotees of Krishna have no material desires, and therefore they are in perfect peace. So we understand that we're trying to find so many ways to enjoy, and science is trying to invent so many more ways to enjoy, and the advertisements are trying to give so many ways to enjoy, so many desires, but we understand what the real goal of life is, explained in Bhagavatam 1.2.9 and 1.2.10, that dharmasya hyapavargyasya nartorthayopakopate nartasya dharmaikantasya kamulabhaya hi smritaha kamasya nendriya pritir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yaschaya karma bihi. That all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation, and that they should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life, or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that the general tendency of any ordinary man in any part of the world is to gain some material profit in exchange for religious or any other occupational service. Even in the Vedic literatures, for all sorts of religious performances, an allurement of material gain is offered, and most people are attracted by such allurements or blessings of religiosity. Why are such so-called men of religion allured by material gain? Because material gain can enable one to fulfill desires, which in turn satisfy sense gratification. This cycle of occupational engagements includes so-called religiosity followed by material gain, and material gain followed by fulfillment of desires. Sense gratification is the general way of all sorts of fully occupied men. But in the statement of Sutta Goswami, as per the verdict of the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is nullified by the present sloka. One should not engage himself in any sort of occupational service for material gain only, nor should material gain be utilized for sense gratification. How material gain should be utilized is described as follows. And he explains in the purport to 1.2.10 that the completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed towards the fulfillment of desires and sense gratification. In such civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, social service, altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately in religion or even in salvation, the very same tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. And he continues later on in their purport that the same is applicable. He also continues later on in the purport that the Bhagavatam says that one should not live for sense gratification. One should satisfy the senses only insomuch as required for self-preservation and not for sense gratification. And then he explains in the purport the crux of this verse 1-10 that jivasya tattva jigyasa, that the human being is meant for inquiry into the absolute truth. Jivasya tattva jigyasa. So he explains in the purport that seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification. Because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. I'll read that sentence again. Seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification. Because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. In every sphere of life, therefore, the ultimate end must be seeking after the absolute truth, and that sort of engagement will make one happy because he will be less engaged in varieties of sense gratification. But we also understand that we have so many material desires as well. So Bhagavatam addresses this in the verse 2.3.10. It's a very famous verse. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kamo dara dihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. So we turn to Krishna no matter if we're full of desires or have no desires or desire liberation. The purport explains that everyone must therefore seriously take up the methods of bhakti yoga, even though one aspires for material enjoyment or liberation from material bondage. And Srila Prabhupada makes a very interesting point in this part of the purport. He says, a kama is one who has no material desire. A living being, naturally being the part and parcel of the Supreme Whole Purusham Purnam, has as his natural function to serve the Supreme Being, just as the parts and parcels of the body, or the limbs of the body, are naturally meant to serve the complete body. Desireless means, therefore, not to be inert like the stone, but to be conscious of one's actual position, and thus desire satisfaction only from the Supreme Lord. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained this desirelessness as bhajaniya parama purusha sukha matra svasukhatvam in his Sandarbha. This means that one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. This is the main crux. This means that one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. And Srila Prabhupada makes a very astute explanation of an intuition. He says that this intuition of the living being is sometimes manifested even during the conditioned stage of a living being in the material world, and such intuition is expressed in the manner of altruism, philanthropy, socialism, communism, etc. by the undeveloped minds of less intelligent persons. In the mundane field, such an outlook of doing good to others in the form of society, community, family, country, or humanity is a partial manifestation of the same original feeling in which a pure living entity feels happiness by the happiness of the Supreme Lord. Such superb feelings were exhibited by the damsels of Rajabhumi for their happiness of the Lord. For the happiness of the Lord. The gopis loved the Lord without any return, and this is the perfect exhibition of the akama spirit. Kama spirit, or the desire for one's own satisfaction, is fully exhibited in the material world, whereas the spirit of akama is fully exhibited in the spiritual world. I'll just continue a little bit more. Thoughts of becoming one with the Lord, or being merged in the Brahmajyoti, can also be exhibitions of kama spirit, if they are desires for one's own satisfaction, to be free from the material miseries. A pure devotee does not want liberation so that he may be relieved from the miseries of life. Even without so-called liberation, a pure devotee is an aspirant for the satisfaction of the Lord. He gives an example here. Influenced by the kama spirit, Arjuna declined to fight in the Kurukshetra battlefield because he wanted to save his relatives for his own satisfaction. But being a pure devotee, he agreed to fight on the instruction of the Lord because he came to his senses and realized that satisfaction of the Lord at the cost of his own satisfaction was his prime duty. Thus he became a kama. And Srila Prabhupada explains that Udara Dihi means one who has a broader outlook. So he explains that people with desires for material enjoyment worship small demigods, but one cannot obtain any result from demigods without getting sanction from the Supreme Lord. So we understand here, he says that everyone, whether in akama or sakama or mokshakama, should worship the Lord with great expedience. This implies that bhakti yoga may be perfectly administered without any mixture of karma and jnana. Without any mixture of karma and jnana. As the unmixed sun ray is very forceful and is therefore called tivra, similarly unmixed bhakti yoga of hearing, chanting, etc. may be performed by one and all regardless of inner motive. We understand that Dhruva Maharaj had an inner motive, but he still engaged in devotional service, and he was purified. Of course, Indra and Diti each had their inner motives, but engaging in being around the devotional service purified them. And we understand in this interesting purport to 2.3.10 that, as we all know, like everyone has that feeling where in the mundane field, such an outlook of doing good to others. There's that doing good to others tendency, and that's actually that intuition of the original feeling in which a pure living entity feels happiness by the happiness of the Supreme Lord. So we have the choice to serve our senses or serve Krishna's senses. In the purport to Bhagavad Gita 6.6, Srila Prabhupada nicely says that one who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. So he talks about the goal of life here. He says the constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. So we're always having to serve the dictations of something or someone. When we get that higher taste, we can slowly lower the mundane tastes and start engaging more in hearing, chanting, and this fortunate Sankirtan Yoga that we have during the Kali Yuga age. We chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And when others hear, they're also benefited from this. Dinabandhu Prabhu spoke of one businessman who heard the chanting of Hare Krishna, and they were chanting every day. And he said, every day you're chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And then I try to go and lay down to sleep, and all I hear is Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So this Hare Krishna chanting is purifying the whole world. Close here. Does anyone have any realizations, comments, questions? thoughts.
Jana Vatsala, I want to thank you for a wonderful class. Took a really deep dive to philosophy of Krishna consciousness. It was very refreshing to hear. Also, really appreciating the quality of your sound vibration, starting with your chanting of Jaya Radha Madhava. I appreciate the effort that you make to clearly enunciate all of these Sanskrit terms. The pronunciation is very good. So I want to thank you. I can see that you've invested a significant amount of time in um, learning and practicing the pronunciation of Sanskrit. I'm quite good at it. It's very relishable to hear. I can also see that you're doing a lot of study and finding all kinds of corollaries in Shastra, all different ways to shed new light and uh, present new angles of the subject matter that's being presented. That also takes time and effort, and I appreciate the time and effort you put into doing that. It makes for a very wonderful class, very potent, very authoritative, very relishable to hear, and very edifying, spiritually uplifting. So I thank you for all those things. And I want to add a few things. Um, um, Starting with the fact that the deity was guilty of having deviated from the specific terms of the sacrifice. And what she did in particular was actually two things. She failed to wash her hands, mouth, and feet, and she also took rest during the sanya, which is the conjunction between day and night. Also, the English term is twilight. And these Kashypa's instruction to follow these various pure purificatory practices is actually not just particular to the sacrifice that he was presenting to deity. These are actually just standard rudiments of human life. They are, everyone is expected to follow these same instructions in order to live a pure and progressive life. Same instructions can be found in the Manu Samhita and other Dharma Shastras, and in many other scriptures as well. It's standard. If in Vedic times a young man would go to study at the ashram of his guru, and he would be taught all these things. So a person takes care not to have his head facing the wrong direction when taking rest. And there are reasons for all of these things. When you fail to follow these instructions, the result is material contamination of one sort or another. And when you follow these instructions, the effect is purification. The opposite occurs there. If you dive more deeply into some of these injunctions, you can see some of the reasons for them. So, for example, the direction in which your head faces while sleeping has various effects on your consciousness. If your head is facing north, influenced by yogis, and I don't remember all of the details, but for Vaishnavas, it's important that your head face either east or south and not west or north. One becomes punishable when you deviate from these principles. Another example, and in the case of Gita, she took rest during the Sanya when she never sleep during the Sanya. Not only the morning and evening Sanyas, but the noon Sanya as well. So human beings are supposed to rise before the morning Sanya. The Sanya is the Sanya, the duration of a Sanya is one Muhurta. Muhurta is comprised of two dandas. So danda is 24 minutes. And Gayatri is supposed to be chanted during these Sanyas. So the morning Sanya begins 24 minutes before the sunrise and continues for 24 minutes after the sunrise. Similarly, noon Sanya and evening Sanya, 24 minutes before and 24 minutes after. When the sun reaches its zenith at midday, 24 minutes prior to that, 24 minutes after that. That is the period of the noon Sanya. It's a duration of 24 minutes, which is one Muhurta. If one sleeps during the Sanya, this is considered sinful. It is contaminating in a variety of ways. You become punishable, and you lose the protection that is ordinarily afforded one who follows the injunctions. An example of how this works is seen in the early life of Ganesh, who was born of Lord Shiva and Parvati, but during a period of time when Lord Shiva was away. So when he returned home, he encountered Ganesh, who was then born, but Ganesh, having been born while Lord Shiva was away, did not recognize his father. So he, being of a Kshatriya spirit, he attempted to protect his home, his mother, and he was prepared to fight with Lord Shiva. A fight, in fact, occurred, and in that fighting, Lord Shiva cut off the head of Ganesh. Subsequently, he was informed by Parvati that this was his own son. So he attempted to remedy the situation. He asked for his servants, his followers, ghostly followers, to find a replacement head because evidently the original head had been destroyed. So he instructed them to find some head. And they inquired, where shall we find such a head? And he advised them that you find someone who is violating the Vedic principles. And what they found was they discovered one elephant who was sleeping during the Sanya. And because the elephant was sleeping during the Sanya, they reasoned that, well, this is a violation of the religious principles, and so this individual is therefore free game. He is not afforded any protection, and so anyone can do whatever they like with him, because he is a criminal. And so they took the head of the elephant, and Lord Shiva used that to replace the head of Ganesh. In the lives of devotees, practically what happens, and devotees have experience of this, if you sleep during the Sanya, you become vulnerable to attack by ghosts. And that contact with ghosts is extremely contaminated. It will devastate consciousness, and you become the ghosts will predate such individuals. They actually will nourish themselves by draining the life force, and so such ghostly attacks can be devastating both to the consciousness as well as the physical health of an individual. Some people chronically have all kinds of health problems that can't be explained by medical science. Sometimes the reason is that they are regularly being predated by ghosts because their lifestyle is improper. We have run out of time. I actually have a lot more, but I wanted to mention that and some other things, because we skipped over text 51 a few days back, and there are some important points that I thought we should not overlook, but perhaps tomorrow. Anyway, I thought I would mention that. I hope that is helpful. So these instructions of Kashyapa to Diti apply to everyone all the time. And not just for Vaishnavas. It's these rules apply to human beings in general. Everyone is expected to know these rules and follow them at all times. And it's only when society becomes very degraded and religious principles are abandoned or completely forgotten that people fail to follow these rudimentary principles. Hare Krishna, thank you again for a really nice class.
Hi, of course, Srila Prabhupada, thank you for those additions about the story of Ganesh and the understanding that these instructions are for everyone, that the same instructions that Kashyapa Muni was giving to Diti, these are just the instructions that are there for people in general. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you so much, Shana Vatsala. Wonderful class. Jai.
You're welcome. Of course, Srila Prabhupada.